Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. I'm always so grateful to come here because this is in one sense, the most sacred place in the universe. Recently, we had a disciple of Srila Prabhupada coming to the Brooklyn Temple, and he was saying this New York City is more sacred than even Vrindavan and Mayapur because these are holy places in India. Just because Srila Prabhupada came here to begin the Hare Krishna movement in the West and take it all over the world. And it is from this exact spot that he established his first temple. So I'm always so grateful and humbled and just in awe of this place and all the amazing devotees we get to meet here. Who's here for the first time? Ah, wonderful. Welcome. Welcome. It's so nice. It's so nice that newer and newer people are always coming and getting attracted to Srila Prabhupada right here from where he began. So we're reading from chapter 7 of Bhagavad-gita. I don't know how familiar everyone is to Bhagavad-gita. Who here has not heard of Bhagavad-gita before? Anybody? Okay. Okay, so it seems like everyone here has heard of the Bhagavad-gita. Has anyone read the Bhagavad-gita here? Okay, great. Everyone's read it. I mean, almost everyone's read it. Nice. So we're reading chapter 7. We'll just continue from last week. Every week they have a verse of Bhagavad Gita being studied here. So if it's your first time, please continue coming every week. So today we're on chapter 7, verse 20. So I'm just going to read the Sanskrit and the translation and purport. Kama ista hita jnana prabhatyante nyadevata tam niyamam ashtaya prakritya niyata swaya. Translation. Those whose intelligence has been stolen by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Those who are freed from all material contaminations surrender unto the Supreme Lord and engage in His devotional service. As long as the material contamination is not completely washed off, they are by nature non-devotees. But even those who have material desires and who resort to the Supreme Lord are not so much attracted by external nature. Because of approaching the right goal, they soon become free from all material lust. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is recommended that whether one is a pure devotee and is free from all material desires, or is full of material desires, or desires liberation from material contamination, he should in all cases surrender to Vasudeva and worship him. As stated in the Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, verse 10, Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udarati tivrena bhakti yogena yajate purusham param. Less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of demigods for the immediate fulfillment of material desires. Generally, such people do not go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are in the lower modes of nature, ignorance and passion, and therefore worship various demigods. Following the rules and regulations of worship, they are satisfied. The worshippers of demigods are motivated by small desires and do not know how to reach the supreme goal. But a devotee of the Supreme Lord is not misguided. Because in Vedic literature there are recommendations for worshipping different gods for different purposes. Example, a diseased man is recommended to worship the sun. Those who are not devotees of the Lord think that for certain purposes, demigods are better than the Supreme Lord. But a pure devotee knows that the Supreme Lord Krishna is the master of all. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 5, verse 142, it is said, Ekala Ishvara Krishna Arasabha Bhritya. Only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is master, and all others are servants. Therefore, a pure devotee never goes to demigods for satisfaction of his material needs. He depends on the Supreme Lord, and the pure devotee is satisfied with whatever he gives. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Kramakana Swami Nitinamine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Gurudasa Jayavita Swami Nitinamine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Pastityadeshtarine. So we're reading the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. It may have previously been mentioned in the other classes or not that Bhagavad-gita is split into 3 categories. The first 6 chapters are discussing karma yoga. The last 6 chapters are discussing jnana yoga. And this middle 6 chapters is discussing bhakti yoga. And chapter 7 is the beginning of the bhakti yoga section of Bhagavad-gita. And it's interesting how it's in the middle because it's like a confidential jewel. It's like a treasure. You know, the part in the middle is the most important. So these next 6 chapters are all about bhakti yoga. And in the previous chapter, in the previous chapters, we learned about the yoga ladder. Now, there's different categories of people, and they approach spirituality in different ways. There's people who are just performing karma. That means they're just material. They're just performing their work, their activities. And then one level higher than that is people who perform karma kanda, which is that they perform their work, but they do some kind of religious rituals in order to get some material benefit. So at least they're approaching God for something. So it's slightly better than just being materialistic. Then one level higher than that is something called Sakam Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means connecting our activities with God, with our spiritual purpose. So that means, and Sakam means with the desires. So we have material desires in our hearts, but we're still going to perform some activities in this world and dedicate the results to God, use it somehow to connect with God. One example of that is if we have a really nice job and we earn a lot of money, then we can give some of that. We'll use a lot for ourselves because we have material desires and we want to fulfill them, but we'll also give some of that to the temples or to something that's going to propagate God consciousness in this world. And so we have material desires, but we're still using what we can in the service of God, in service of Krishna. And then one level higher than that is Nishkam Karma Yoga, which is that we don't have material desires and we're using all our activities as a way to serve God. So, for instance, if you don't have any desires for yourself, but you just want to serve, you want to give whatever you have, you just give it in service. That's a very high level of spirituality. And then higher than that, the highest is Bhakti Yoga. And that means to serve God, serve Krishna purely out of love in the heart. That means nothing for me, everything for Krishna. And I know when I was reading up on this, it was interesting because I was wondering what's the difference between Nishkam Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, because they both seem very similar. But there's a small difference. In Nishkam Karma Yoga, we may not have material desires ourselves, but we're still serving the way that's comfortable for us. We can give everything that we can and have no desires for ourselves. But Bhakti Yoga is that we serve Krishna purely the way he wants us to serve him. And that means if he tells us to go get a job in another country to earn money and give everything for him, and we really don't want to, but out of love for Krishna, we'll do anything to serve him. I mean, I'm giving examples that only involve money, but it's not the only way to practice spirituality. But sometimes Krishna may want us to go to some very difficult place to be, whether it's to share his message or whatever, but it's a service to Krishna and we really don't want to do it. But out of love, we will happily take on that sacrifice, as opposed to not having any desires for ourselves, but giving what we can in a way that we're comfortable. So that's two different levels of spiritual realization. So these middle 6 chapters now, starting with chapter 7, is all about bhakti. And bhakti is an affair of the heart, but this chapter is called Knowledge of the Absolute. So it's very much related to the head. And it's because at our stage, the stage that we're at approaching Krishna consciousness, we're not there yet where we can just give our whole heart to Krishna. If we try to do that, we may end up being a bit sentimental. So Krishna gives a lot of knowledge about how to approach him, who he is. And all of this knowledge is meant to give us realization in the heart. It's not just knowledge to fill up our brain with more information. When we have like a brain overload of information, it's actually meant to go deep into the heart so that it can transform the heart and give us realizations. So up until this verse, Krishna has discussed many things in chapter 7. He's discussed the material energy and the 8 parts it consists of: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These 8 parts constitute the material energy. Then he speaks about the spiritual energy, which is made up of the living entities. And the living entities are trying to exploit the material energy. We're trying to control the aspects of the material energy. Just control our life, control anything in the material world. And Krishna is saying that he's actually in charge of both of these energies. He's the one in charge. And then he gives examples of ways we can see him in this world. He says he's the taste of water, he's the light of the sun and the moon, the heat and fire, the fragrance of the earth, the strength of the strong. Basically putting forward the point that everything comes from him and everything rests in him. Everything only exists because of him. So we can at least understand that theoretically at this point in Bhagavad-gita. And he's also saying he's in charge of the modes of material nature. So it's been mentioned quite a few times in Bhagavad-gita in different places. But the modes of material nature are a very big subject. It's the 3 energies that are governing our life. They govern every aspect of our life. And we're actually being controlled by the modes of material nature. Everyone in this world is being controlled. And the modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are combining and affecting all of us, affecting all our moods, our mentality, and it affects everything, the time of day, the food we eat, the type of mentality we have. Everything falls into these categories. And Krishna is saying that people actually don't know that they're under the modes of material nature. And he is above the modes of material nature. So he is not controlled by the modes. In fact, he controls the modes of material nature. And the only way we can stop being controlled by the modes of material nature is if we surrender to Krishna. So, and then he goes on to describe the different types of people who don't surrender to him and the different types who do. Now, he mentions the atheistic people, people who are averse to God completely. They don't come to Krishna, and therefore they'll always be under the modes of material nature. And people whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. That's exactly what it is. The knowledge is stolen by this material nature. And those who are grossly foolish and the lowest among men. People engaged in activities that are destructive to themselves and to others. These kinds of people generally don't approach Krishna. Then he speaks about those who do surrender to him. He speaks about the distressed, people in trouble, people who are going through a difficulty and then they come to the realization, let me go to God. Others who want some wealth, they're praying for something material. Those who are just inquisitive, people who just like to learn something. They want to know about God. And those who are really searching for the Supreme, searching for the absolute truth. And he says that those who are in full knowledge and who are engaging in his service, in devotional service to him, that's the highest person. That's the best to him. And now he's talking in this verse about the demigods. He's speaking about how people in a lower level of Krishna consciousness actually they surrender to the demigods. Now, who are the demigods? Does anyone know what the demigods are? What any names of demigods, or like what their position is?
Managers of universe. Managers of universe.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
Devi Durga, Saraswati, Shiva,
Yeah.
Brahma, all are demigods.
So there's a lot of demigods. And the way we understand them is that, they say 33 million demigods. But the way we understand their position is that they're like managers that work for Krishna's government. I like what Prabhu said here, governors of the universe. So if you think of the way a country functions, there's the president, and then there's all the people on his board that take charge of different aspects of the country and different, there's like a minister of finance, a minister of this, a minister of that. So that's how the demigods are. Sometimes people mistake the demigods to be God, but they're not actually God. I know growing up especially from an Indian background, there's a lot of confusion about who the demigods are. We just see so many different forms when you go to a temple or in people's houses. There's just many, many, many forms. And then sometimes people think that they're all interchangeable. You could have Krishna, you could have Durga, you could have Shiva, you could have Ganesh, all on the same altar, and we don't know whose God is. It's not clear. But when we read the scriptures, it becomes very clear who is God and who the demigods are. And there was a person who could just identify just by visiting temples of the demigods, because they could see the demigods are always busy doing something. They're always doing some work. In all their forms, they're holding something, they have a task to perform. And Krishna, he's just playing on his flute. He's just playing. So then that person could identify actually that Krishna is God, because he has nothing to do. He's just playing with his friends. And then the demigods all have some work to do. So the demigods are actually living entities, just like us, who have a lot of power. They have a lot of power, even in the government. There's certain people, if they're in government, they have more power than the rest of us. They have more scope to exercise their freedom, they have more control than the rest of us. So therefore, we may think, some people think the government is God, because they have so much power.
True, yes.
But actually, they're ordinary living entities just like us, but they are very, very powerful, and they're given a responsibility to take charge of different aspects. So we have, like, for instance, the sun god. His name is Surya.
Mhm.
And there's a god of fire, Agni. And there's a god of air, Vayu. There's a goddess of learning, Saraswati. So the demigods are in charge of all of these things. It said that people say, if I want to do, want to get good results in school, pray to Saraswati. Or if you want to heal from an illness, as Prabhupada says in this purport, pray to Surya, because we need sun, we need the energy from the sun in order to heal. So the demigods, because they have these, they have so much power, people sometimes mistake them to be God, and mistake them to be the person to go to when we need something. But in this purport and in many places in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna and Srila Prabhupada are saying that we're actually still meant to go to Krishna for everything, because he is the one in charge of the demigods. He is like the president, and the demigods are like his ministers. So even if we have material desires, or if we don't have material desires, we should still go to Krishna. There's the verse that was quoted in this purport says, a person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desires, without any material desires, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the Supreme Whole, the personality of Godhead. So that's from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, verse 10. So instead of worshipping the demigods, we should still take our material desires to Krishna, even if we're at a lower level of Krishna consciousness where we still have material desires. The best course is to take those desires to Krishna. The whole Bhagavad-gita is taking us on a gradual journey. Some people ask, if Krishna is God and we're meant to just go straight to Krishna, why is there so much mention of the demigods or these other processes of karma, of jnana, so many different things in Bhagavad-gita? But Bhagavad-gita is meant to take us on a step-by-step process and gradually develop our consciousness. In the next verse, actually, and in a few verses afterwards, Krishna is saying that if someone is very attached to a demigod, and they're attached to their form of worship, the way they're worshipping the demigod, he actually just allows them. He makes their faith in the demigod very strong. He allows them to worship, because by doing that, they will gradually at least develop into, they'll continue worshipping and then may eventually get to the point of worshipping Krishna.
Mhm.
So he's not telling people to reject what they know, but he is also telling us that this is not the highest. So it's for us to decide what to do. And ultimately, it's all dependent on our consciousness. In many places, actually a few places in Bhagavad Gita also, Krishna says that even if we pray to the demigods for something, they cannot actually give anything without Krishna's sanctioning it. So if we compare it to the way the government works, we may think, I have a contact who's the minister of something, finance or whatever. But it's not that we can go to them for a favor, but they can only really give that favor if the president allows it. They don't have their own independent power. They have power that's dependent on their superior. So the demigods have this power, and they controlling many things, but it's all under the direction of Krishna. And that's why we can go to them for our material desires, but only when Krishna grants it will we actually get it. And therefore, why not just go directly to Krishna? Because he will also give the material desire that we have if it's going to benefit us in our long-term journey, in the bigger picture of our journey towards Krishna. If it's a desire that's not actually going to benefit us, Krishna won't give it, because he will only give something that is beneficial and that's going to help us get closer to him, if that's truly our sincere desire. And in this chapter also later it's mentioned, and even Srila Prabhupada mentions in whenever he gives lecture, when he gave lectures on this verse, that even though devotees know that Krishna is God, they're still not disrespectful to the demigods. So it's in the same way like how we have the government. If you fully surrender to your president and you're very you understand the president's in control, you're not going to disrespect his ministers. They're all in line. So you're going to be submissive, respectful to all of them, but you know you know everyone's position, you know the hierarchy. And the example is given of, Srila Prabhupada gives this really beautiful example of when we try to water the root of a tree as opposed to watering the leaves and branches and flowers. So when we want something to grow, we can water the leaves of a tree, but it's not going to be effective. If we water the root, that's when the whole tree will grow. So in the same way, when we worship Krishna, then all worship to the demigods automatically happens. The demigods are automatically satisfied when we worship Krishna. But if we try to worship the demigods individually, then it's not that satisfying to them, because their mood is that they want us to worship Krishna. There's a story of how Lord Shiva, he's always meditating on Krishna, and people go to him for their material desires, and then he quickly grants it just so that he can get back into his meditation on Krishna, because he wants everyone to worship Krishna. And even there's some stories of very exalted devotees who pray to the demigods, but it's only to get closer to Krishna. So in that mood, we can pray to the demigods if it's with the mood of getting pure love for Krishna, or getting closer and closer to Krishna. But in terms of material desires, Krishna is not recommending that we go down that route. And in chapter 9, later in Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, "Those who are devotees of other gods and who worship them with faith actually worship only me, O son of Kunti, but they do so in a wrong way." So Krishna is now talking about this worship of demigods. It's going to him anyway, but it's indirect. It's an indirect way of worshiping Krishna. And therefore, he's saying it's in a wrong way. And he says that such people are not very intelligent. It's like when you're trying to eat something, and you don't know that if you put food in the stomach, it's going to nourish your whole body. But you try to nourish yourself by feeding your individual bodily parts. But it's not going to work. And only someone who doesn't understand how the body works will think that's going to work. So Krishna is just saying it's just for people who don't know so well. In a lecture by Srila Prabhupada on this verse, he mentions a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 18, Text 12, which says, "All the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudev. On the other hand, a person devoid of devotional service and engaged in material activities has no good qualities. Even if he is adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining his family and relatives, he must be driven by his own mental speculations and must engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. How can there be any good qualities in such a man?" So this is a strong statement, but it's saying that all the demigods actually become present in a devotee. So the demigods become fully satisfied and fully cooperative when we decide that we want to serve and surrender to Krishna. But when we don't surrender to Krishna, then whatever we do, it doesn't amount to much. That's what this verse is saying. it's like we're missing the point of what we're meant to be doing. So, as we progress through Bhagavad-gita, it's asking us to give up our material desires, because we would worship the demigods because we have material desires. It's on that lower rung in the ladder. And the way that's recommended in the Bhagavad-gita is by getting a higher desire. Param drispani vartate. That means when we have a higher taste for something, we can give up a lower taste very easily. So if we get spiritual desires and we get spiritual taste, then it's easy to give up anything lower, anything material. I think we experienced a little bit of it today with Atmanivedan Prabhu's kirtan.
Oh, yeah.
It was so ecstatic, I just didn't want it to end, because we can listen to ordinary music, but that's going to get boring after a while. But with kirtan, it's increasing our taste, it's increasing our love in our heart for Krishna. And then after that, life changes. Every time we hear kirtan, life changes, and somehow our material desires are getting burnt up. My spiritual teacher used to say that we should just leave our desires in a box on the shelf. That means we all have material desires, our heart is full of material desires, but instead of endeavoring for it, going and praying to the demigods or doing anything to try and fulfill them, what we should do is just put our desires in a box, put it high up on the shelf, and then get on with Krishna consciousness. Get on with our reading, our chanting, kirtans, festivals, associating with devotees. And then when we come back and we look at the box, some of the desires will be gone. Actually, most of them will be gone. And that was what Srila Prabhupada, that was his recommendation too. He came to the West and he didn't tell people, give up this, give up that immediately, give up your material desires immediately. He just engaged everyone in Krishna consciousness. He gave everyone a higher taste, and then it was easier to give up these things. And then so those material desires, they gradually just disappeared from his disciples. The other day, Ram Roy Prabhu was taking us on a tour of Srila Prabhupada's places in New York. This is because New York is a very sacred place. Many places in New York are tirthas, holy places, because they were graced with the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada. And it was my first time going to so many of these places. And I could meditate on Srila Prabhupada coming to the West and really deeply think about that huge sacrifice he made. And it's not even that cold now.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very cold. I'm from South Africa, so we don't get weather like this, but it's not that cold now. Srila Prabhupada had it way worse when he came, and he didn't have the appropriate clothing, but he still painstakingly pushed on, came all the way from India just to give us what we have today, this Krishna consciousness. So when we went on the tour, we saw the home that Srila Prabhupada was staying in before he came to 26 2nd Avenue, before he started this temple, and before he moved into that room at Dr. Mishra's place. And then we saw the room he moved into after Dr. Mishra's place, because Dr. Mishra and him didn't exactly always get along because of their differing philosophical understandings of God. So eventually Dr. Mishra moved him to this other location, which was very far away. We did the walk. Srila Prabhupada used to walk every day to use the bathroom and to cook. And we walked and we were meditating. Ram Roy Prabhu told us to meditate on what Srila Prabhupada had to do and how difficult it would have been for him in the cold, not wearing the appropriate clothing, just with his robes. And we did, and it was, I struggled, and I'm young, and Srila Prabhupada was old and going through all of that, but he's transcendental. So it was his service. He's so full with bhakti, pure love for Krishna, that whatever Krishna required him to do, he did out of love. So he did that long walk every day, a few times a day, to eat, to cook, and to use to shower and everything. And then we walked past the West End Superette, where Srila Prabhupada used to buy groceries to cook. Also, everything is a walk, a bit of a walk. I was imagining him doing that, just coming all the way just to give us Krishna consciousness. We walked past this building that Srila Prabhupada wanted to buy to make into his first temple. And it's actually for sale or for lease or something currently. And yeah, it's really nice. But just to see his meditation, how he was always thinking how to practice, how to increase Krishna consciousness, never thinking about his own difficulties, never thinking, I should have a better situation for myself. We saw his diary entry where he was alone in America, while in India everyone was getting ready for the upcoming festivities. It's Gaur Purnima soon, which is the birthday of Lord Chaitanya. And in Srila Prabhupada's diary, it said how everyone in Vrindavan and Mayapur will be getting ready for the festival, but he's here all alone in New York without anyone. But he said it's okay because he came to fulfill the instruction of his spiritual master, his spiritual teacher. So all of this just gave me, going on that tour and just every time I come to New York, it's so inspiring, because I feel so close, like Srila Prabhupada was just here. He just came, he just sat here, he just gave everything. And now it's our opportunity to take up this process and spread it. There's, in the Nectar of Devotion, it says that the 5 most potent forms of spiritual activity is chanting the holy names, like we did, reading the scriptures, associating with devotees, having these groups where we can really nourish ourselves, where we can discuss the scripture, where we can have solace, where we can discuss our lives and have higher guidance. Living in a holy place, and everyone who lives here is very fortunate because New York is a holy place, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. And also worshipping the forms of the Lord. We have so many beautiful temples in New York where we can worship the forms of the Lord. In fact, the Bhakti Center is having a flower festival just now, which I will be going to, and they will see really beautiful, gorgeous worship of the form of the Lord. So there's many opportunities to experience the mercy, experience Srila Prabhupada's mercy right now, right here in New York. We know that there's the Harinam that goes out every day. If anyone doesn't know about the Harinam, please make a note. Every single day, there's devotees going out and doing kirtan in the subway, or in the summer it's on the street. And that is, I think, one of the most amazing parts about being in New York. Just seeing how everyone is, seeing how just anyone from the street takes up Krishna consciousness and hears the holy name and starts their spiritual journey. And then we have Thursday night kirtan at Bhakti Center. There's Wednesday night kirtan at the Brooklyn Temple. There's Sunday night kirtan at the Brooklyn Temple. There's Soul Talks on Saturday. There's a Tuesday program at the Brooklyn Temple. Bhakti School has every Tuesday a wonderful program. And then there's Wednesday and Saturdays at Matchless Gifts. So there's so many opportunities here. New York is actually buzzing with opportunities for us to enhance our own spiritual lives and to expand it and share it with everyone else. So I'll end there and see if there's any comments or questions or reflections.
Like you were talking about Srila Prabhupada, came to my mind. Like, he's a great example of the difference between that stages of the karma yogi, the highest stage, and the real devotee. Like, he surrendered, he didn't complain, they had to come to this new place. he just did what Krishna wanted him to do.
Yeah.
He's like, that's a good example. Also, I think in one of the talks you mentioned that like higher taste, like maybe like you mentioned that you travel to all these different places, and then you wanted to see different places, but eventually you kind of says like I'm not enjoying this place. I'm only enjoying in the context when it comes to Krishna, like to see the temples and all that stuff.
Yeah. That was my experience of higher taste,
Yeah.
developing some kind of higher taste when I went to different countries and just couldn't enjoy anything because I always wanted to travel, but then when I actually ended up traveling, I was already practicing bhakti yoga for quite a while. And then I realized, oh, there's actually nothing worthy of seeing because the only thing worthy of seeing is now the form of Krishna, the holy places, the devotees, the temples. And then I only felt happy when I went to the temples in those very places. And it's not to say anything bad about the places themselves, because it's all Krishna's energy. We see in the Bhagavad-gita. He says anything beautiful and opulent we see in this world is a spark of Krishna's splendor. So that means anything beautiful we see here, it's like showing us a glimpse of Krishna. But then how much more beautiful is seeing Krishna himself in his form and seeing his temples and seeing his devotees and hearing his name. So it is true that Krishna does give us a higher taste if we just decide to be on this path.
That's stuck in my mind. One of your talks when you were giving that was a good example of higher taste. Yeah. Thank you.
So you quoted, so you mentioned the higher taste. So the verse in the Bhagavad-gita is chapter 2, 659, where that phrase comes from. So I'll just read that. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasudena. So rasavarjam rasopyasya pramdishvanavartante. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remains. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. So then what I wanted to ask is, can we get the higher taste through worship of these demigods?
I think over time, I have seen people who have had some experience worshiping the demigods, and then over time, because through that path they would have given up so many things that are not going to help them on their spiritual journey, and then that makes them more awake to receive transcendental knowledge, and then if they just read Bhagavad-gita, they can understand correctly and then get the higher taste for Krishna. I personally know people. I don't know if it happens often, but I know a few people who went down that path. But sometimes we get too attached to the worship of the demigods, and therefore it's hard to change. And that also happens with many people, like especially of Indian descent, like where I'm from, people in my family. If we're so used to worshiping the demigods, it's difficult to adjust. So it's both, I think. That's what I've experienced from speaking to people. Sometimes, and I know with some family members, they know that they even say, I know that this is true. I know that Krishna is God. I know that he's supreme, but they just can't, make that adjustment because I think they feel like they're, letting the demigods down or like turning away, or they cultivated a relationship with the demigods for so long. So that also happens.
Question. So the story is that one day I spoke with one devotee with Indian roots, right? And when he was small, he asked his father, "Whom am I supposed to worship from all these gods and demigods? What was on the table?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "You can worship everyone except Krishna or Vishnu, because Krishna could take all your material things, not just fulfill them. So as I know from scriptures that Krishna could fulfill your desires his own way. He could fulfill your desires when it's too late for devotee, and he doesn't know what to do with this. Or Krishna could fulfill his desires, his own way. When you don't really like the result of that. So for materialistic people, they don't really know that. And you said, as you said, that you have to water the roots, But if they know that, since the beginning, what they supposed to do? So this tricky question.
No, it's interesting. It's interesting because it is true. Krishna is known as Hari, so he takes things away. It's one of his names. But then it's not that he always takes things away. He does if that's what's required to get closer to him. But in many cases that we've seen in the scripture, he's also given everything, like to his friend Sudama. Is it Sudama?
Yes, Sudama.
Yes, Sudama. He who was very poor, and he gave everything. He gave so much wealth. He was actually attached to being poor, so Krishna gave him so much wealth. So it depends on the situation. If we're very attached to wealth and it's not going to serve us, then Krishna can decide, no, I'm going to take all of this away, and it's because it's going to lead to our degradation. Sometimes when we have too much wealth, we can easily spend it on all the wrong things. But if Krishna can see that, okay, we're attached to wealth, but we have the propensity to use it for him in service, then he'll give us the wealth. So it depends on what we are going to do, and Krishna knows more than us what we are going to do. But it is a difficult question because I know people who also the purification that came in their life, they weren't ready for. So Krishna took things away, and it had the opposite effect of them getting close. They actually got further away because they weren't at that level yet where they could accept this as Krishna's plan and think, no, this is for the best, for my purification, for me to take more shelter. They actually became a little bit atheistic afterwards, because that also happens. So and then I also wonder, why? Why did Krishna do this if this is the result? But then sometimes it's also that they have to go through it and come back stronger, because that also happens where people go away and then when they actually come back, then they're fully convinced. Then it's like they've been through it all. They've left and come back to Krishna, and then now that's final. So I think it's also a test if someone is upset, oh, Krishna's going to take all my material things away, it's showing the level that they're at. And it's also very difficult to be okay with having all your things taken away. I know recently I just had a little plan of mine being taken away. Things happened, and basically I had this whole plan, and then it didn't work at all, and I had to adjust to Krishna's plan very quickly, and it was very difficult for me. And I thought, that's not even everything. It's not like Krishna took away everything. He just took away this one plan I had. But it's very difficult. But that's why we need the association. We need devotees around us, because they can give us the higher perspective. They can teach us how to view everything we go through. And always stay close to the devotees. I think that no matter what we go through in life, if we're close to devotees, we'll be okay. Because we'll always have friends, and we'll always have people engaged in Krishna consciousness around us, even if we cannot currently engage in Krishna consciousness due to whatever we're going through. If we just stay with the devotees, then somehow we'll pick it up again.
I was thinking, you were mentioning how, especially for people with an Indian background, then it can be a challenge for some of them to know the difference between understand the difference between worshiping God and worshiping those who are not God. And I was thinking, though, for those persons who are not of Indian background, actually it's actually not so hard to relate to if you try to think about what's really going on here. Narrow TV. So if you want to, so like it's distracting.
Sorry.
So if you're in the care we'll leave. So because in the material world, like everyone's trying to get something, right? Like you know what you're in the beginning class, I'm giving various examples, people about how money, how money is, people can use money in Krishna service, but in material, most people are looking to achieve money or power, sensual enjoyment, all these things. So I think the pleasure that one can get through worshiping a demigod, it's actually rather similar to the pleasure one can get when one gets that, when one, gets into the school that one wanted to, or when one gets the promotion at the job that one wanted, or gets a lot of money, and then a way to help one understand it even better, how worship of demigods, it shouldn't seem like so irrelevant to our lives. If you, without at all naming names, if you think about any certain persons who become extremely popular in the world, whether they're celebrities or most recently, whether they're some sort of political demagogues, then people actually, what they do sometimes with these famous and or powerful people, influential people, is they do what's akin to worshiping them. Mm-hmm. So they supplicate themselves before such people and try to do what they think that person wants them to do. And then they think that then their interests will be furthered because of their trying to ingratiate themselves with this influential person. And then sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes like, for example, and this is absolutely not a political comment, but I mean, for example, I saw an article where there's an employee in a federal department in the U.S. who said, well, I voted for, the current president, and then they had to give their opinion about how they felt about that now that they just lost their federal job as a result of their vote being part of the vote of the majority. So worship of demigods ultimately leads to defeat because in this material world, seeking to obtain anything other than that which is absolute and spiritual, eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, it all comes and goes, it's temporary. And your masters, the masters that we have in the material world, they're not supremely powerful on the one hand, and also they're not devoted to us. But Krishna, he's the only one he's the only worshipable object that will actually satisfy our ultimate desires and will never turn his back on us. Every other, it doesn't work. So that was just my comment I was thinking about. Thank you. And if you have any further thoughts on that.
No, I was also, when you were speaking, I was thinking of I think one of the verses later where Krishna says that when you worship the demigods, you go to the planets of the demigods. But if you worship me, you come to me. So, and Krishna is in the spiritual world. The demigods have their own planets, but it's all in the material world. Therefore, even if we worship them, we go to their planet, it's not, it's not eternal. We have to leave at some point. We can have a nice life of enjoyment there, but we still have to leave. When we go to the spiritual world, that's eternal, and that's the only place where nobody dies and everything is always blissful. So really, yeah, like worshiping the demigods is not going to lead there. It's very rare where it can make you take the step to worship Krishna. But it's really worshiping Krishna that's going to take us to the spiritual world.
I like the way from today class, the way you said like different stages. It's all within the Krishna consciousness. It's just you call the lower levels of Krishna consciousness. So like Krishna consciousness is God consciousness, So like I like the idea that it's even all that leads to the higher if you surrender. Like,
But then why would we take a staircase when we can take an elevator?
yeah, no, I know what you're saying, but like there's even stories
it's all a journey.
It's a journey. Like even like somebody like there's a devotee. They said like for example they were partying, they were leading that kind of lifestyle. They were not maybe conducive for the Krishna consciousness. So they were like, so Shiva appeared to them in the eyes, and he's the number one Vaishnava, and he told him to go to Krishna temple, and like that was like wow. It's like so he had that dream, but like so even that it depends what levels. Like you said, like sometimes you've seen people worshiping demigod, but it depends what level. If you're sincere practitioners, if you succeed, if you asking for material, then most likely it won't lead to Krishna. But
it happens usually when they are very sincere in their practice, and it's really about wanting to know the truth. They're not doing religion just for business. They're doing it because they want to know the truth. They may not know it right now, or they may think a demigod is the supreme. But then when you give them the truth, they can accept it, and they're happy to accept it. If there's nothing else, we can end here. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.